Welcome to Hunters and Unicorns, the pre-sales edition of the 33 CXOs. Today, we welcome Diwakar Prabhakar. Having taken leadership roles with a long line of highly successful organizations that include BladeLogic, BMC, Medallia, and AppDynamics, he is now Vice President of Solution Consulting at Sprinklr. In this episode, we discover how Diwakar applies the principles of the McMahon playbook within diverse technical domains to forge partnerships with some of the most prolific CROs in the history of technology. This is his playbook.
In the pre-sales edition of the 33 CXOs, we discover the crucial role that the pre-sales organization played in what is regarded as the greatest success story in the history of software sales. When John McMahon reunited the team at BladeLogic, he had a clear vision to create a sales and pre-sales organization that was in absolute unison. The symbiotic and almost telepathic sales rhythm is the benchmark for best practice. The outcome is not only execution excellence, but a shift to a value mindset which transcends any shift in technology. The pre-sales team now take executive positions at some of the fastest, most disruptive technology companies in the world. What we discover is that John McMahon's vision has not only changed how we sell, it's changed what we sell. Welcome to Hunters and Unicorns, the pre-sales edition of the 33 CXOs. I'm Simon Koutis and I'm joined by my co-host Patrick Harrison.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And it's an absolute honor to be joined today by Diwakar Prabhakar. Diwakar, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us, Diwakar. It's a pleasure.
Likewise, yeah.
So for our listeners and for our viewers, in the way of an introduction, Diwakar, you're currently Vice President of Solution Consulting at Sprinklr. Obviously, it's a playbook company led by Luca Lazaron, who's one of the 33 CXOs, which is all part of the story that we're obviously telling. But whilst we are going to spend a bit of time talking about Sprinklr, I do want to go right to the beginning and really get to where the journey really began for you. So, Diwakar, where did your passion for technology begin?
Right from high school, right? So I've always been meddling with technology, and I have my bachelor's in engineering. So I knew technology was in my future, but I had no idea what I was going to be doing in technology, right? I mean, by the time I finished my bachelor's and master's, I knew I wanted a paycheck, and that's all I cared about at that point, right? But I had no idea that whatever I did then, I could connect the dots to where I am today. It was too much of a stretch.
Mm.
And so in terms of straight out of university, obviously you graduated with a master's, as you kind of mentioned. What was your first role straight out of college?
My first week was actually unloading boxes from the warehouse, which is a bunch of computers. And so here I am thinking I have a master's in electrical engineering and I'm unloading boxes, but I'm like, hey man, I'm getting a paycheck, so I shouldn't complain. I'm just going to do this. And actually it was fun, right? Because looking back, the work I did the first couple of months, it wasn't just unloading boxes, but it was also installing operating systems in those boxes, right? And obviously I had no experience doing that, but that experience basically set me up for BladeLogic a few years later. You never know these small tasks or projects that you're given and how these small ripples have a big effect later on in your career. I can connect those dots looking back.
Yeah, fantastic. It was actually a customer support role officially?
Yeah, it was a customer support role. I was working as a consultant for the U.S. Department of Labor in Washington, D.C. I was there for, I think, maybe 3.5 years, something like that. But first job out of college. So you do what you can to get a paycheck, like I said, and try to learn as much as you can, right? And I think that was the whole goal at that point.
Yeah, fantastic. And then in 1996, you moved to a company called HCI Technologies.
That's correct, right? So I actually worked for a startup in before, I think that word was popular back then. It was a company called Digital Analysis Corporation. I was there for a few months. We got acquired by another company, and which 6 months later we got acquired by Computer Associates. So 3 jobs in less than a year, actually, from the time to ending up at CA. And CA was when I really started getting into a customer-facing role, right? And decided to leave CA to work for HCI Technologies. It's more of a professional services company, and I did that for a few years before I ended up at BladeLogic, I think sometime 2002.
Yeah. And was pre-sales as clearly defined a function as it is today, or is it more of
I don't think so, right? Back then, pre-sales was not necessarily a role. It was, you always needed someone to talk about the technology and explain the technology to customers and prospects. So I think it definitely wasn't a well-defined role, right? When I started my career, when I finished my master's, all my friends and peers, were writing code, and I wasn't very good at that. So I'm like, okay, there's got to be something else that I can do.
And then obviously you did a stint at Peakstone and then made your way through to kind of BladeLogic, where you joined in 2002, and you were attached to the pre-sales team from day one, were you? Was that always the plan for you to join the pre-sales team?
At BladeLogic, yes. Actually, Peakstone was an interesting experience, right? So it was 2000, 2001, the dot-com days. My first big learning experience is it's not just about technology, right? But it's also about revenue, right? Having great technology and having great products that no one is buying makes no sense, right? So one of the things that stood out to me when I spoke to BladeLogic back then was the fact that they had about $2 or $3 million in revenue in 2001, and having worked at Peakstone for a year, and I think we had maybe 1 or 2 customers the whole year, right? I'm like, wait a minute, they have $2 million in revenue, and I think a couple of hundred customers. I'm like, okay, this seems a lot more promising than Peakstone.
Yeah. So obviously still very early days in terms of the BladeLogic story. What did you find when you came into the organization? What kind of setup? How was the sales culture at that point?
So very little in terms of setup, right? I think we may have had maybe 35, 40 employees at that point, right? I think I was the 4th or the 5th SC that joined BladeLogic back then, right? So that's the thing, right? We did have training for a week. I remember going to Boston for a week of training. It was purely product focused, which is good training, right? But nothing in terms of sales process or sales execution. None of that playbook existed back then, right? Well, the playbook existed at PTC, but it did not exist at BladeLogic for sure, right? All of that came much later. And I was there for about 8-9 months. We were losing deals left, right, and center. Even though I felt from a technology perspective, we were better than the competition, or better than the way they were doing things today. I'm like, why are we not winning, right? And it was incredibly frustrating.
In terms of looking back now, do you see clearly why those deals were being lost? Was it?
It took a long time, right? Steve Wolski, I think, joined the board sometime mid 2003. Brought in a whole new sales approach and a framework. It wasn't a big sales team, right? I think there was just about 6 or 7 salespeople initially. 5 of us SEs, and it took about another 6 months for us to really start seeing results, right? And it wasn't like a magic wand that came in and we changed things. It was a process, and it took us and it took me a while to really see the benefits of a rigorous sales approach. yeah, absolutely. Looking back, it's not just about technology, but it's having a really good process, that you follow to qualify deals, to build champions, and the MEDIC framework that we all talk about today. But it took a while for us to really see it and believe it.
Sure. So, how important, in your opinion, is the relationship between pre-sales and sales in having established the right value proposition for your clients to actually start to get the traction?
It's extremely important, right? At the core of it, especially in enterprise sales, it really comes down to two people, right? It's the salesperson and the pre-sales person, right? These two people working very closely, collaborating, and making deals happen. Right now, there's a whole ecosystem that supports you, but at the core of it, it's these two people, right? And to the point that you just made, Simon, it's not just about technology, but it's the value that it drives in the organization. That is the biggest thing, right? I mean, for the longest time in my career back then, the word value meant nothing to me, right? I was naive enough to believe that you show up with really good technology and magic happens, right? People start signing checks and giving you a PO, right? But to really talk about value and everything else that goes around with it is extremely important, and that comes down to the salesperson and the pre-sales person working and trusting each other.
As a technologist, did that frustrate you a little bit? Obviously, we see a lot of people that are passionate about technology, and they can almost get stuck in the technology world, right, without necessarily being able to elevate them. How easy was that transition for you to really adopt a different mindset?
It was very frustrating, right? Because it didn't mean much to me, right? Like I said, right? I mean, being a technologist at heart, you show up with great technology, do a great demo, and then you just think, you want to believe that things magically happen, right? And then when you start looking at, even when the deals are happening, right? And you start to look at the effort between, let's say, $100,000 deal versus $1 million deal, and you start talking to the SC that worked on the $1 million deal versus you working a $100,000 deal, the effort seems the same. So I'm like, okay, so wait a minute. So what is the difference between what that person is doing versus what am I doing, right? And the difference is really about how you position value, how you attach yourself to critical business needs and identifying pain points, building champions, talking about value throughout the sales process. That's the difference between a $50K deal or a $100K deal versus $1 million deal. And it's the ability to do that in tandem with the salesperson. At the end of the day, my job is to represent the technology and the solution. But if I can take it one step further and map the value that our solution is providing, working with the AE or the salesperson, I think that's where the magic happens of really the teamwork happens.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So, and just to take it back to the technical side for a moment, some of the other individuals we're featuring on this series, Diwakar, such as Sahir, Sung Park, and quite a few other individuals, they came to BladeLogic with no pre-sales experience, coming more from a sysadmin background and roles of that nature. I realized you came with pre-sales experience, but what was it about the technology specifically that drove that?
Yeah, so not much pre-sales experience, I got to be honest, right? I mean, I'd worked in the pre-sales capacity, but nothing as rigorous as a playbook that John McMahon, Steve Walsky, Luca, Lazaron, Scott Davis, all of that brought into play, right? So yes, but not really.
Yeah. And was it the complexity of the technology that drove that, or what was behind bringing in the individuals that were brought in as those SEs?
So listen, I always believe that a critical element of the SC role is to establish credibility within the first 30, 45 minutes of the meeting, right? So, depending on the industry or depending on the solution, having the ability to say, I've been in your shoes, I know what you're going through, because I was in that function or a similar function in my previous life is extremely important, right? And if you've spoken to Frank Lamprey, Sahir, Sung, all of them had the technical background, had the experience before coming to BladeLogic, right? And as did I in my first job, right? So bringing that credibility, bringing that experience to a conversation is extremely important, right? Because that's how trust is built, right? I haven't been able to do the same thing to build that credibility in other companies that I've worked for, because my role has been different. But at Medallia, I was never the customer experience expert at all, right? But at BladeLogic and at BMC, I had enough IT operations experience to tell them that I've been in your shoes before. So having that credibility, I think, is extremely important for an SC.
Yeah.
Wearing customer shoes is obviously an element of your playbook. Do you actually have to come from that background to wear your customer's shoes, or are you just talking about wearing your customers' challenges?
So that's a really good question. So the answer to that question depends on the stage of the evolution of the company, right? Early on, when you're building the team, you really want to make sure that the SEs can hit the ground running as soon as possible, right? So coming from the industry, or coming from the competition, or even coming from a professional services organization that's delivered solutions or similar solutions, I think it's extremely important to build the genesis of the team, right? And as you scale, you can start bringing in candidates from different backgrounds, and with the proper level of coaching, training, and support, you can get them there, right? But the genesis of the team, I really think you need this team, this group of people that have the empathy, that have the experience, and can build credibility very, very quickly.
Yeah, great insight there. I suppose in terms of, taking you back at that moment, right? You're obviously new to that particular type of organization. The technology isn't selling as well as it could potentially. What is driving you at this moment to really make this work?
So at BladeLogic, I remember we had finished a proof of concept at a company in Virginia. I was there for 2 weeks on site, and it was $100,000 deal. I remember that very clearly. And we delivered all the use cases, with the exception of maybe one. And we went to the VP of IT, and he said, "Yeah, I'm not going with you guys, and I'm going with another vendor." And walking out, our interim VP of sales, the sales executive, and we were just debriefing in the parking lot, and I just couldn't understand why we had lost. I think they wanted us to demonstrate 10 or 12 use cases. I think we'd gotten 11 out of the 12 really out of the box. But it was incredibly confusing to me at that point. I'm like, why did we lose? We had no answers. And it took me a long time to understand that it wasn't just about technology, but it's about qualifying deals. If you commit to a proof of concept, what is the decision criteria? What is the decision process? Do we have technical champions? And if we do this, is there going to be a decision? Right? Having the process around the technology, I would argue, is more important than the technology itself.
Mm-hmm. So how useful and how important was that, having that kind of medic-based kind of qualification methodology and the various other kind of playbook elements that were in full force? Obviously, you mentioned Steve Worsey came in, followed by Steve Strachan and John McMahon thereafter. Mm-hmm. How important was that for you in your evolution, and perhaps how you started to view pre-sales once that playbook really kicked in?
I think it's extremely important, right? Having a structured framework to assess where your deals are and knowing what the gaps are based on a rigorous framework is extremely important. You can call it medic, you can call it whatever acronym you want, but it really lays out a very simple framework by which you can be honest with yourselves and see, hey, where am I in this deal, right? What's missing? What do I know? What don't I know? And what do I have to do? So if you look at it as a Google map to your destination, I think that's basically what it is.
Yeah. And I know that obviously protecting your time is obviously a playbook element of yours, right? How does that mechanism enable you to really do that? Yeah,
it's a tough one, man. I mean, it's this is sales in a high growth company is not a 9 to 5 job, right? And there's a saying that goes like, what's important versus what's urgent, right? And you're always in conflict between trying to figure out, is this important or is this urgent, right? And and at times it can seem very confusing, right? So, but one of the sales leaders I worked with said that, hey, if everything is equally important, then nothing is important, right? So, I think Stephen Covey was the person who said big rocks and gravel, or big rocks and small rocks. So I remember at Medallia, the couple of the SC leaders and we had a Google sheet that we would write on all the things that we needed to tackle, and every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, we would look at that sheet, saying that, okay, this is a big rock, this is not a big rock, right? And once a quarter, we would sit and, okay, let's tackle these issues, right? So having that discipline to just write on all the things that come to your mind, and then look at it once a week and saying, okay, this is a priority, this is not a priority. But it's a tough balancing act because you're never going to get it right all the time.
Was there a light bulb moment after the adoption of the playbook where you realized how profound the impact would be, or did it take a while for the pre-sales side to adopt to the sales methodologies?
Yeah, so it wasn't a light bulb moment for me per se, right? I think we were all frustrated. Anytime there's a change in CRO, there's a new playbook, there's always a big question mark, right? Is this really going to work now, right? So there's, at least on the pre-sales side, there's a lot of skepticism, right? For sure, right? And at least speaking for myself, that is definitely the case, right? And then, 6-9 months later, you start to see the results coming. Every quarter, we get together as a team, we celebrate the wins, we recognize what worked, what did not work. And then when you start to see the results come in, you start to look back saying that, hey, what happened? What is the process that resulted in those deals coming, right? And then when you've gone through that process yourself, and you can go to a QSR and talk about the deals and all the hard work that you had to, that you did, and all the hurdles that you had to overcome, then you start to believe in the process, right? But winning is essential, right? You need to get small wins. And then you start to see it work, right? I think that's the big thing. Every time there's a new playbook, you don't believe it till you actually see it working.
Yeah, great. So I suppose BladeLogic was a moment in time, right? The first series was all about the 33 CXOs and the incredible success they've gone on to achieve incredible things, leading the fastest growing technology companies in the world. You've obviously worked for quite a few of those CXOs. I suppose at that time at BladeLogic, were you aware of just how special that time was? Did you have a moment to appreciate it, or was it just kind of, you kind of took it for granted to an extent?
So no, at that point, I didn't appreciate it for sure, right? I mean, I was incredibly happy to be part of the team, but I had no idea that those 5-6 years at BladeLogic defined my career till today, right? It made that experience, basically was a career-changing experience for me and for a lot of people that I know, right? But at that point, we were growing, we were competing against a much bigger, much better recognized company. We were winning, so it was fantastic to be part of that team that was winning, and it was always coming from behind, hard-fought wins. So it was great to be part of that, and then going public. All of that was a fantastic experience. But no, I couldn't tell you at that time this is going to define my career and tell you that I would be here based on that. But listen, I mean, I was lucky to join BladeLogic, and I'm incredibly grateful that I got the opportunity. And man, that was definitely a career-defining moment for me.
Sure. And then obviously the IPO, 2007, yep. which was obviously a very, very interesting time. And then just three quarters later, and the BMC acquisition was obviously announced. What was that time like for you?
Yeah, we were confused, right? In the sense, we'd just gotten public, we'd shown results, we were growing, And then we get acquired, right? And we're like, wait a minute, it seems like, someone just turned on the lights at the end of the party and asked everyone to go home, right? But looking back, that's probably one of the best things that happened, right? Because 2-3 months later, we had the financial crisis in 2008.
Yeah.
And, timing is everything. And again, so fortunate that the acquisition happened at that point in time, because I don't think everybody got impacted in the meltdown, the stock market crash of 2008, and we just missed it. Just missed it. So again, luck, timing. So incredibly grateful for that too.
I think it's something we see commonly, apprehension when sales and pre-sales engineers are moving from that startup culture to that larger global software company. Was there a lot of apprehension in the pre-sales team at that point, or was it quickly realized that it would be a different kind of solution-based sell that you'd be moving to?
Yeah, so BladeLogic at that point was primarily a single product, right? We had 3 or 4 use cases, or maybe a little bit more to be focused on. Then BMC was a much bigger company and had a much more a broader platform of solutions, right? So there was always a little bit of apprehension. Where does BladeLogic fit in the grand scheme of things? But I think for the next couple of years, we all adjusted, and it wasn't that we were an isolated product. We were definitely part of the bigger solution, so I think BMC was a good experience too. Big company for sure. Definitely a lot more bureaucracy and everything else that comes with a big company, but it is what it is. Yeah.
So you joined as a practice lead for the service automation platform. So was that kind of the overlay, supporting the overlay kind of sales overlay function in a pre-sales capacity?
I was still part of the SC team, but I was really supporting all the emerging markets in Asia Pacific and Latin America, really enabling the pre-sales teams in different regions in the world, and getting them familiarized with BladeLogic and service automation, as it was called.
So at that time, there's obviously quite a lot of things happening. Obviously, you land at BMC, the BladeLogic guys are all looking around, kind of thinking to themselves, are we going to stay? Are we going to go? John McMahon obviously stepped up and took the big role as the kind of leading the sales organization of everything outside of mainframe within BMC. Was the pre-sales organization kind of making their own decision, or were they kind of following what the kind of leadership, what was the pre-sales team saying during that whole kind of point of, are we going to stay or are we going to go? Was there ever a chance of you leaving, or was it, we're going to see this through?
Yeah, so it is one of those things that we felt, at least the BladeLogic team, John McMahon's team, we were all part of this elite group, if you will, right? Without sounding too arrogant. But we all wanted to stick together as a team, right? But we knew this was going to come to an end at some point, right? So at least I felt, I'm like, I want to be here with these guys. I went to battle with these guys, and I don't want to leave. But at the same time, I'm like, this is boring, and I'm not going anywhere here. So it was a question of who's going to make the move first, right? And I think McMahon transitioned it to Luca at that point. And Luca was the CRO at BMC for about a year, maybe longer. But at some point we all decided, okay, we got to go chart our own careers over here. At the end of the day, I need to own my career, so I got to make the decisions. And I did not make a good decision leaving BMC. I'm going to Copian, right, which is the startup that I did for a few months, maybe a year.
Sure. So June 2011. Obviously, you, as you mentioned, you moved to Copian, took the decision to leave BMC. Mm-hmm. Was that we looking to get back to that startup culture? Was that the key driver?
Yeah, definitely. Right. That was the motivation, to get back to a smaller company. Trying to recreate the BladeLogic magic, if you will, trying to find a small company that had customers, that had revenue. That was definitely the thinking at that point, right? I think the big mistake that I made was not realizing that it's not just about technology and customers. It's also the CRO and the playbook that is part of the process that makes it all work. Even with that, there's no guarantee it'll work. But you take that away, then the chances of failure just go up, right? So, I did that for a year. We got acquired by Good, which ended up at BlackBerry. But so it was a good time for me to leave. But looking back, I think that was the mistake that I made, right? Not realizing that I'm just part of the team, and the people, the process, and the playbook are all equally important.
Mm.
So you were director of pre-sales. Were you the most senior pre-sales person in that organization when you joined?
At Copian, yes.
Yeah. And so I suppose, was that the time when you really started to appreciate, perhaps? Was that the first time when you really appreciated what perhaps you'd learned and discovered at BMC and BladeLogic before that?
Oh, definitely, right? Because within a couple of months, I knew I'd made a mistake, right? But the thing about you is you never want to give up, right? Or first, it's human nature to deny you made a mistake, and you don't want to give up because you want to fight it because you think you can change things. And at some point, you realize that you can't fight this battle yourself, right? You have to fight it as a team. And then you realize, wait a minute, I made a mistake, and I've given it a fair shot. I actually ended up leaving, right? I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, but I knew Copian wasn't the place that I wanted to be at, right? So when the acquisition was announced, I said, this is a good time for me to leave. I hadn't figured out that I was going to come to Medallia at that point when I left Copian.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So then with Scott Davis, I believe, you joined Medallia around a year after
Yeah, so actually maybe 6 months later. So that's a funny story. I lived in Washington, D.C. back then. I think it was early spring, March, April, something like that. I was riding my bike, and I ran into Scott Davis on my bike ride, right? So,
oh, really?
Wow.
So we connected, we talked, and then I knew he had left BMC. So I was just talking to him. I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he said, I think he was working as a consultant for Medallia at that point. So he said, "Hey, I'm consulting for this company in Silicon Valley. Do you want to take a look at it?" So I said, "Sure, I'll take a look at it." Gave me the name Medallia. I went to the website, and I think it came back to him the next day. And I said, "Scott, I don't understand a thing of what Medallia does." Right? So, and then he said, I asked him. I said, "Why?" I'm not sure exactly what I asked him, but that very quickly I found out. He said, "Hey, Steve Walsky's on board." I'm like, "Okay, that's it. Okay, I get it. Sign me up. I'm ready to start." So, of course, we went through an interview process, met with the founders of the company, but that's how it got started.
Yeah, and you were in a global pre-sales role with Medallia.
Yeah.
Sure. Is that where you started maybe creating a playbook of your own for pre-sales, or is that?
So, I would say maybe refining the playbook, right? I don't think the playbook is ever written in pen. I think the playbook should be written in pencil, and you need to be able to erase parts of it and adjust it. But the core elements of the playbook are the same, but every organization is unique. Every industry is unique. So taking a playbook and adapting that to that company or that industry, I think that's the fun part, right? Because I don't think the BladeLogic playbook would have worked at Medallia. The Medallia playbook would not have worked at AppDynamics. So the elements of the playbook are that there's definitely common threads, but you need to be flexible enough to know what works, what needs to be tweaked, if you will.
So what's your initial play then? So obviously you've gone in with Scott, and you're obviously trying to establish what is that initial play? What are you trying to do when you first get there, and how does that kind of evolve over time?
Yeah, so that was another shock to my system, right? Because even though I thought I knew the playbook, and I thought I'm going to bring the BMC playbook and just execute it, right? I remember going to my first customer meeting at Medallia, and I'm not kidding. I literally did not understand a single word of that conversation that was going on between the salespeople and the customers, right? I came out in a shock, and I had a glass of wine with Scott Davis that evening, and I told him, I said, you may have hired the wrong person over here. And I pretty much told him that I don't know whether I can do this job. And I told him straight, I said, I don't understand what Medallia does. So when I don't understand what Medallia does, how the hell do you expect me to build a team when I don't understand what we do as a company, right? So I think the conversation was, did you ever flunk a course in college? I said, no, but I came pretty close, but I worked my ass off and I pulled back. So he said, hey, I'm giving you time to figure out, right? So I think that was the key thing, right? I needed to understand, what is it that Medallia did, right? Customer experience was just 2 words, but I really did not understand the whole industry that Medallia was doing, right? But I go back to the elements of the playbook, right, that we talked about earlier, right? First, get people on the team that understand the industry, understand the technology, understand the solution, understand the value that it drives, right? So the initial playbook was, the first play was hire a few people from either the competition or from a similar industry, and beg, borrow, and steal people from professional services and bring them into the pre-sales organization. And then I think the next year was all about observing and trying to figure out what's working, what's not working. And it took me about a year to figure out the right profile of candidates that I needed for the team, right? And after that, it was all about execution.
And in terms of really understanding that kind of your role as a pre-sales partner, you're a partner obviously to the sales organization at the time. How important was it in you really helping to create that value proposition? Was pre-sales lent on? Were they leaning on you to help establish that as part of your role within pre-sales?
Yeah, I think so, right? I mean, first of all, the relationship between the pre-sales leadership and the CRO, that's paramount, right? That relationship is crucial for both sides, right? Because when you think of large enterprises and the sales teams is easily the biggest team, and the second biggest team is pre-sales, right? So having those 2 leaders trust each other, know each other, understand the playbook, understand what the expectations are, I think that relationship is critical to making it work.
And just reflecting back on that time, you said that elements of the playbook from BMC and BladeLogic weren't aligning to the Medallia. Was that on a technical level, or were there other gaps that you were really trying to kind of,
at a lot of levels, right? So so Medallia, being a software company, and Sprinklr is similar in that sense, right? We're a technology company, but the people that make the decision to go with Sprinklr or Medallia, they're really not technology people, right? So the technical aspects of the solution almost does not matter in a typical sales cycle, right? At BladeLogic and BMC and AppDynamics, a proof of value or a proof of concept is an extremely important step in the sales cycle. At Medallia and Sprinklr, it's not, right? So recognizing these big differences and adapting your playbook to that is really important.
So what is the role of the pre-sales person in an organization like Medallia and Sprinklr?
It's still being a subject matter expert in the industry and the solution for sure, right? But the way you validate your solution was different at AppDynamics and BladeLogic and BMC versus here, right? At AppDynamics and BladeLogic and BMC, you actually had to prove that your technology worked in their environment, right? Whereas here at Sprinklr and Medallia, it was more of a solution workshop, really explaining exactly how your solution is going to work in their environment, more in a whiteboard or a PowerPoint presentation-like setting, right? So it was really conveying the fact that you understood all their challenges at a fair amount of detail and mapping a solution to them without necessarily showing it from a technology perspective. Now, we did demos for sure, right? But doing proof of concepts was not the most important event in the sales cycle. Now we're bringing elements of that at Sprinklr over here, so we'll see. But I think that playbook is still evolving.
Yeah. So in terms of Medallia, at the time when they appointed you within that role, within that kind of responsibility, why do you think they didn't go for the more obvious choice of finding someone that had, come from that industry? What is it that they were bringing with you that enabled you to kind of execute what they needed at that time?
In fact, that was one of my questions to the president of the company. I asked Amy Pressman. I said, "Hey, why me, right? We talk about the 3 whys in sales, right? Why do anything? Why now? And why us? I think it's true when you're interviewing with the company too, right? Why do you need a head of pre-sales? Why now and why me, right?" And I asked her. I said, "Hey, wouldn't it be easier for you to hire someone that understands the industry?" Hire someone for the competition, pay them a lot of money, and bring them over, right? I asked Amy Pressman the same question, and she said, again, it's been a few years, so it's a couple of things, right? One is she was willing to take a chance on me to give me the runway to learn a new industry, right? And prior to coming to Medallia, I'd always worked for software companies that sold to IT, and coming to Medallia was a completely different experience, right? So I got a chance to learn a completely new industry, right? Which I myself wouldn't have given that person that chance for sure, right? Because it is too risky. But I think the fact that I'd worked with Scott Davis and John McMahon and Steve Walsky to put together a similar playbook and process, I think that definitely helped. But we realized that the limits to the playbook, we have to define or revise the playbook for that company and for that industry.
Yeah. Do you think that was a clear investment in mindset as opposed to experience?
I think it's both, right? I think a mindset more than anything else, right? It took me maybe 5-6 months to realize, maybe a little longer to realize the BMC playbook is not going to work at Medallia. And then that's a critical moment of truth, right? Because when you realize that something that you thought you're going to implement is not going to work, then what are you going to do, right? You can either run away and say this is not working out for me, or you can say they're willing to give you if they have the faith in you to figure things out and you're willing to put in the effort. I think it's a critical moment of truth. You can either fight or run away.
And did you embrace the fight?
I think so. I was there for 5 years.
I know Scott Davis is obviously very, very fond of kind of that success because you did go on to an IPO. When you joined, did you think that was always the potential? Obviously, Steve Walsky was on the board. It's again, it's a great kind of a lot of potential. But did you think you would get to that IPO stage within that 5 years from day one?
So that was definitely part of the plan, right? But like with every other company, right? I think we had our highs and lows, ups and downs, if you will. So definitely a lot of us that were there initially were not part of the IPO, which happened much later, a year or two after we had left. So, but I think looking back, I think I had a small part to play to help get Medallia to the IPO, but we did our part, right? But it did not happen in the time frame that all of us wanted. But these are things that are outside your control, right? It's not just sales; it's product, it's marketing, it's all the different departments within the company that matter.
Fantastic. So after 5 very successful years at Medallia, Diwakar, early 2017, you go back to the world of applications with AppDynamics.
Yep.
How did that come about? Obviously, lots of people in the business, I'm sure you already knew.
Yeah. So obviously, the relationship I had with sales leadership and the SE leadership, made a big difference. I think it's always you want some level of comfort working with people that are maybe successful, right? So that you trust the playbook, the process. So you want to go back and play for the same team. So I think that is a big factor for me going to AppDynamics. The other thing is the entire technology and application landscape had changed significantly for the 5 years that I was at Medallia, right? It had exploded, right? The entire tech stack had changed. So to go back and take a look at application performance management and the whole application space from a completely different perspective, that was mind-boggling in terms of how much the whole landscape had changed. Application performance has existed, since the 1960s, 1970s, and as the technology stack has changed, I kind of my knowledge of that industry had kind of frozen in time till about 2011, 2012. Coming back 5 years later, you would think 5 years is not that long, but that's long enough in technology to find out, holy shit, this is a completely different space now.
Yeah. And what size was the company when you joined? Was it already in rapid growth mode?
Oh, it was definitely rapid growth for sure, right? They were getting ready to go IPO. And I think 24, 48 hours before the IPO, Cisco came and made the offer. So the acquisition happened.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with Cisco, right? Big company, but we were like, I think we may have been the first or second SaaS acquisition that they made, right? So it was always interesting. But Cisco is a big behemoth, right? And we were just a drop in the ocean.
And how did the playbook environment compare to BladeLogic? Obviously, I believe BladeLogic was CRO at the time. Was it similar to BladeLogic? Was there a further evolution taking place at AppDynamics?
I think it was very similar to BladeLogic, right? I think that because I'd spoken to a couple of the SE leaders when I was talking there. So the familiarity with the process and the similarities was very appealing. It is very similar. A highly technical sell. You were selling to IT operations. You're selling to application people, which were, of course, supporting the business, but heavily driven on proof of concepts, technical deep dives, proof of concepts, qualifying, making sure that the big difference was at AppDynamics, which we did not have at BMC, was there was always a trial version of the product that you could get from the website, right? You sign up, you can download, I think, a 1 or 2 week license of the product. And the founders had done a fantastic job building a really good foundation of customers that had downloaded the product and had gotten used to it, right? So the usage of the product was really quick and easy to install and start to see value out of the product, right? And then the enterprise team came in and started closing these big deals, right? So that's something that we did not have at BladeLogic at all, right? We were very controlling about how you could use the product in a proof of concept. So I think that is the biggest difference in the playbook.
So as the third, it's regarded as the third iteration of the playbook. Obviously, so PTC, BladeLogic, and obviously AppDynamics, I think, is one of the major success stories where we've seen the real kind of implementation of this. BladeLogic, obviously, at the helm, really driving this through. We're seeing the crystallization of a lot of those concepts. Did you find that by the time it came to AppDynamics, it was evident just how much more focus there was on certain elements of the playbook? Things like the ICE criteria, which were a lot more defined, for example, among other things. Did you was that your experience?
Oh, definitely, right? I think, every industry you need to refine the playbook, right? So I think having the whole process around business value, it's not just a proof of concept; it's actually a proof of value, right? I think it's the same exercise, but we had evolved from proving that our technology works to proving that it actually drives value within the organization, right? I think that is the biggest thing, right? Early on at BladeLogic, it was all about installing the technology, demonstrating that we could do all these use cases, right? But to go from that to tying those use cases to value, and therefore looking at it, I know it's just a small change in nomenclature, but evolving from a proof of concept to a proof of value, I think it's a huge mindset difference, right? So asking yourself as an SC, if I show you these features, what value is it going to drive, right? And just to ask yourself, right? So what and who cares? Those are the two big questions. We need to ask all the time when we're talking about technology is showing you.
So, Apti, going through hypergrowth, you're obviously in a senior sales engineering role in a management team. What were the challenges you were facing from a recruitment perspective, in particular skill saturation? I know was obviously something that was predominantly, was quite prominent at the time. So how were you dealing with those challenges, and what was your kind of mindset around recruitment at AppDynamics in particular?
Yeah, so AppDynamics, for the most part, now I don't know how things are today, but we, even though we were part of Cisco, we operated as a more or less an independent entity, right? We had our own CEO, our own CRO. So even though we were part of Cisco, outside of being integrated with the Cisco HR system, we had our own email addresses. So we operated as an independent entity. So for the longest time, we managed to hold on to our identity that had made it unique, right? So from a recruiting perspective, of course, we were part of Cisco, so we had the mothership supporting us, but we could always say, hey, we're an independent unit or division within Cisco. So I think that helped us with recruiting. I don't think it really hurt us with recruiting in any way. But still, right, we were still part of Cisco, so people that have a preference for high growth companies, early stage, pre-IPO companies, they're like, hey, the big exit has already happened. Why am I really coming here, right? So it was always hard to recruit, but it wasn't as bad, as it could be. It could have been.
Mm. And in terms of kind of general advice for our viewers, maybe looking to scale up pre-sales teams, Diwakar, do you still, till this day, prioritize personality and drive over the technical skills, or what are your kind of key takeaways for driving scale of a recruitment team?
Yeah, so you need both, right? It's not one or the other, and it's a question of where do you over-index on, right? And I think at different stages of the evolution of the team, you need to focus on different things, right? So if at Medallia, the first year, I think we just hired about 6 or 7 SCs, right? So there's all a question of how do we get this to work, right? And what's working, what's not working, and then before we start doing the next wave of recruiting, what lessons have we learned, right? So at every stage, you need to look back and be honest with yourself of what's working, right? So, but having the ability to build a relationship or establish credibility within the first 30, 45 minutes, I think that's critical. That never changes, right? So if you've hired someone from outside the industry, then hold that person back till you feel comfortable that you've trained them and supported that person well enough to establish credibility, right? So you can't do that early on. So you need everyone to establish credibility by themselves with little hand-holding and support. But as you grow, you can afford that luxury. So I think that never changes, really.
Is that something you've continued to do throughout your career then, such as BladeLogic? You've hired quite a lot of people from end user or in industry, or have you?
Yeah, BladeLogic was, I think all of us came with industry experience or actually working as sysadmins in our previous lives, right? So that having that experience definitely helped, right? But as we grew, right, we started bringing in people with different experiences. So it's not, you also need diversity, right? Not diversity, you need diversity of thought, diversity of experience. So having that, having that diversity is extremely important to scale, for sure.
Yeah. So for the modern team, a blend of pre-sales experience, a blend of technical experience, a blend of
consulting experience. I think all of that matters. Yeah. If I look back at Medallia, I think for the most part, initially we had people from within the industry, from the competition. We also had people from with a strong consulting background, so it was really blended in that sense.
Sure, fantastic. One of your playbook elements is actually selling candidates away during the hiring process. So talk us through that. Is that really testing individuals at the time of the hiring process?
I think so, right? Because listen, I mean, it's working for a high growth company is very stressful, right? And this isn't something that, and a lot of the processes are undefined, right? At Medallia, we looked at candidates and we always say, hey, does this person have the ability to deal with ambiguity, right? In any sales cycle, there's some things, there's a lot of things that you don't know, right? Even when you're presenting your solution, you're making a lot of assumptions about what their problems are. You try to do as much discovery, but there's so much information that you don't know, right? So dealing with all of that is extremely stressful. So so I try to be as honest as possible with people to set the expectations and what their experience is going to look like at that company. And if you're not sure, this is a good time to back away, right? Because the worst thing that can happen is you sign, you start, and I waste the next 6 months of my life trying to make it work. And then by the time of course, I'm going to be in denial for the first 3 months that this person is not going to work, right? Then I'm wasting my energy for the next 3 months to fix this or get this person to where I need them to be. And then I realize it's not going to work. They're frustrated, they're angry. Then my teammates have started to notice that this person is not holding their weight. And by the time I hire the next person and get that person productive, I've lost a whole year.
Yeah.
Right. So I'd rather scare the person away right now than bring the person on and then spend the next year trying to fix this.
Yeah, completely.
So what are you actually scaring them away from? Is it the technical ramp up? Is it when you say scare them away, help us understand what it is that you're referring to.
I need to refine that. It's not just scaring away. I think it's being really honest about what the expectations are and what the ramp is going to be, especially if they've never worked in a high growth company before. I think you owe it to themselves saying that, hey, listen, this work is going to be stressful. And if you've never done this before, it's going to take you 6 months to start getting used to and getting comfortable with the pace at which we operate. So are you ready for that, right? And this is going to have a consequence on your personal life and your family. It's very hard to separate the two, especially the pandemic age that we live in today. So are you ready for that, right? I think it's having those honest conversations and not setting up improper expectations is really what I like to do before I tell them, are you ready for this? Because I know from a skills perspective, they can do it. Do they have a will to go through what they're going to go through for the first 6-9 months? And
what's the result of that? What happens as a consequence of you taking this approach?
I think most of them work out, honestly. You hate to lose a candidate at the very last step, but I still think that I'd rather lose a candidate then than they come and start and leave in 6-9 months later, right? So if you look at the big picture on the problems that you can avoid, and by the way, if you're going to be a leader, the single biggest thing that you're going to be measured on is the people that you bring on, right? So I'd rather scare people away and rather than hire the wrong person because that is going to really impact my credibility within the organization when I've hired bad people.
Mm.
Sure. And by scaring them away, you're obviously referring to a transparent conversation about what the expectations are, what the demands are, rather than selling them the dream, I suppose, is perhaps what you're saying. Obviously, hopefully set them free. And if that really aligns to their belief system, that it's going to really, really be someone that, will be successful in the environment, which is very demanding.
Yeah, it's not just doom and gloom, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're a high growth company. We have all these high expectations and what the future looks like. And we definitely think that this person could help us there, but it's give and take, right? So I want them to be part of the process. I want them to enjoy the benefits. I want them to experience more in the career that they never thought was possible, but are they willing to sacrifice to get to that, right? That's the question that we have to be really honest with. Both sides need to be transparent with each other.
Fantastic. And of all the successful pre-sales engineers you've hired and those you've worked with earlier in your career, is there a key personality trait that those people share, that drive or competitive spirit?
Yeah, I think it's that for sure, right? I think it's the drive, the desire to learn, their ability to take risks, and I think going back to transparency, right? Being honest with yourself to know what you know and what you don't know, and okay, I don't know this, I have to go learn this. At Medallia, the people that really taught me about customer experience were the SCs that I hired, right? They taught me more. No one at Medallia ever confused me for a subject matter expert, right? Every one of those 85 SCs that I hired knew more about the industry than I did, right? So I learned from them. And I wasn't embarrassed to admit that I didn't know much about the industry and they taught me. So being honest with what you know and don't know and willing to put in the effort, I think goes a long way.
So I imagine that was obviously a really important stepping stone to enable you to be where you are today, which is, Sprinkler, very, very high growth, high potential, battery venture backed. Obviously, Neeraj doing his thing. Doing his thing again, 578 million, I believe, 578 million of investment, a recent top up of 200 million investment, led by Hellman, back in September. So, it's a very high potential organization. Luca Lazaron obviously at the helm. How much of what you've learned historically at both, Medallia, BladeLogic, BMC, AppD, how much of that has enabled you to really execute what you're doing at the moment at Sprinkler?
I think it's 50-50 because, like I said, right? I mean, you have to recognize that Sprinkler is different, right? In terms of the people, the organization, the culture. It's interesting you asked me that question, Simon, because coming from Medallia, where Medallia is in a similar industry as customer experience, right? So I thought that experience would translate, right? I couldn't have been more wrong, right? The solution at Medallia and the solution at Sprinkler couldn't be more different, right? We're trying to solve the same problem, but we're going about it in completely different ways, right? So, the CTO of the organization had warned me. He said he didn't go too much into detail, but he said the Sprinkler solution is very different from Medallia, right? And in my mind, I'm like, okay, how different can it be, right? And I couldn't have been more wrong. The solution is incredibly different. It's much broader. It's much deeper, right? So and by the way, I just was in an interview just before I started this conversation, right? And I told the candidate, I said, are you ready to learn 25, 30 different products? Oh, by the way, we also launch products at a higher frequency than I've ever experienced in my career before. So are you ready to know that? Are you ready with the feeling that you'll never be up to speed on the product at any given point in time? And you could be here for 5 years, you still won't know everything about Sprinkler. So are you ready for that challenge, right? And that's the thing, right? So elements of the playbook, definitely, but Sprinkler is not the same as it's so different from every other company. So I think that's the refreshing part. Embracing that challenge. I think that's the fun part for me.
Mm. You need some very adaptable individuals for this team.
Incredibly adaptable, right? Because I think the biggest thing I learned from Medallia is if you think the past is going to help you, you're so wrong, right? And so knowing, I knew things were going to be different. I didn't know how different it was going to be, but even then it was a shock, right? To find out, wow, this product and the technology and the solution is so different from Medallia, right? Solving the same problem, but from a completely different perspective. So being uncomfortable with not knowing is extremely important, right? And being adaptable, like you said.
Mm.
So how do you survive as a well, I'll rephrase that. How do you thrive in an environment when you can never be a true subject matter expert in all of the technologies or all of the solutions that you're obviously able to provide your customers?
You never stop learning, man. I mean, I try to shadow as many customer-facing meetings as I can, right? And there's always something to learn, right? So I think the learning process never stops, right? So being open, being comfortable with the fact that you don't know or you know very little and you have so much more to learn. I think that's key, right? The day you start getting comfortable is the day your value to the organization starts to go down pretty quickly.
Sure.
And what's quite a general question, Diwakar, but what has enabled you to have such a successful career? Obviously, IPO and acquisition throughout, and working for lots of fantastic organizations. How have you really been able to scale and grow your career? And what advice would you give to individuals looking to follow in the same footsteps?
Yeah, especially in pre-sales, I think working with CROs that you trust and respect is extremely important. For me, the Steve Walski, John McMahon way of doing things is part of my DNA. When I made that mistake of going to Copian, where the playbook, the people, the process did not exist. That is a big learning moment, right? And to me, that's part of my criteria for working for any company, right? I'll never deviate from that, right? I won't make that mistake again, right? So it's the other thing that I learned is it's not just about technology; it's about understanding the value that it drives in an organization, right? And then looking back, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, it's the technology and revenue that matter. So if it's revenue is a really good indicator of how well the company or the product is doing. So almost the technology, I would say it's secondary, right? It's about the value and that you say it can deliver, but the real proof is, are they willing to write the check, right? So revenue, the value, and the technology. I think all three are equally. That's the way I look at companies.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I suppose in terms of giving the general advice to our listeners and our viewers, what's the best advice you could give, aspiring pre-sales professionals, whether they're managers or looking to take those kind of forward steps in their career? What's the best advice you could give them?
Never stop learning. I think that's what I would say, right? Don't get siloed into a specific industry or technology. Just embrace new industries. I think it's always fun to take a playbook and adapt it to a new industry. If you look at what I did from BladeLogic to BMC was similar in terms of industry, but BMC to Medallia couldn't have been more different, right? Medallia to AppDynamics going back again was very different, right? So be open to change. I think that would be my advice, really.
Mm. Yeah. And from a leadership perspective, what do you think's allowed you to transition and grow the way you have into such senior roles?
I think there's a lot of elements that make a good leader, right? But for me, it's how many other leaders have you created, right? If you look at John McMahon and Steve Walski, and if you look at the pedigree of leaders that they've created, it's just unbelievable, right? Across the industry, right? I think that's basically what leadership to me is all about, right? How many other leaders have you created, and how many other leaders have they created, right? I think to be a small part of that tree, I'm incredibly fortunate and blessed.
Sure. So the final question we ask as part of this series is, what technology or area of innovation do you think will have the biggest impact on business over the next decade?
Probably social media, and I know it has a negative connotation with what happened in 2016, but I think social media and the way big brands and organizations leverage social media is extremely interesting, right? I'll give you a very quick example, right? My wife and I celebrated our anniversary in April, and we had a trip planned to Prague. Of course, we couldn't make the trip, right? I tried to call the airline. I tried to make change my reservations on the website. It was too painful and slow, couldn't do it. Picked up the phone. I was waiting for 45 minutes trying to talk to an agent. And then on the website, I found a WhatsApp number, right? Now, I've used WhatsApp for years, but it's primarily on a personal basis, like talking to you guys, setting this one up, for example. But KLM had produced a WhatsApp number, right? And using WhatsApp, I completely rebooked my tickets, right? And I'd never used WhatsApp to engage with a brand or an organization before, right? So, I think the way organizations are leveraging social media and all the different messaging channels is really changing the way customers are engaging with brands and organizations. So I think that is here to stay, and it creates a whole bunch of challenges for organizations that they're not ready, and that's the reason why Sprinkler exists.
Sure, great. Thanks for that. Great insight. So I suppose as a kind of a closing statement, if I was to reflect on what we've spoken about today, I think the 33 CXOs, which was the very first series and the second series that we recorded, is all about the sales executives that have gone on to achieve such incredible things. They're obviously scaling some of the fastest growing technology companies in the world, and we're seeing incredible success. But I suppose what people don't appreciate is how adaptable they have been in being able to apply the playbook in so many different types of organizations across so many different industries and selling to such different verticals in such different ways. And I think that what I've reflected on the most today is the importance of the pre-sales organization in being able to create that perfect partnership with the sales organizations to really figure out what was going on. Now, in terms of yourself and your career and the way that you've grown and developed, you've really gone out of your comfort zone and taken on challenges that are really technically not within your strength. And despite one of your playbook elements being wear the shoes of your customers to really understand their challenges, what I think you've demonstrated more than anything is a mindset. And because you've got the attitude to go and implement a playbook that you know works, coupled with the mindset of really finding out and coming from a place of value, you've always been able to figure out the proposition which has enabled you to create unicorns and decacorns and have the success ultimately that you've gone on to achieve. We've seen it at Medallia, we've seen it at AppD, we've seen it at Sprinkler as a great example. So today's been a truly great session. It's really been very, very informative. We've taken so much from speaking with you today, Diwakar. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you, guys. This was fun. It's always good to reflect, learn from, make mistakes, learn from them, and get better, right? So it's been a fun conversation. Thank you.
It was a fascinating conversation, Diwakar. Thank you again.
Awesome. Take care, guys. Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you. So to our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed today's show. Please remember to subscribe and please comment, share, like. There's lots and lots of content available on our website. So please do check out somuchsoap.com/blog. And we look forward to welcoming you to another show soon. Thank you very much.